Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. And my background was pretty much like everyone else's. It was just normal. I was born in the Arkansas area, and my dad took a job in Memphis, Tennessee, which was about 200 miles away. And all his brothers and sisters were in Pine Bluff, Little Rock area. My mother had five sisters, and she left all her five sisters behind. And we moved to Memphis, and the family thought it was the end of the earth. Moving 200 miles away in those days was like moving to the other side of the moon. Yeah, growing up in Memphis was a great experience. My dad was a dispatcher for a bus lines, and that's the reason we moved to Memphis. My mom, who was a college graduate, unheard of in those days, particularly for females, she landed a job with the Memphis Cossack Library System. So we were set in Memphis, and my school was probably 2.5 blocks from my house. So it was within walking distance. And naturally, as most boys my age, I was thoroughly enjoyed participating in sports of all kinds. Oh, our family was just like any other family. It was a happy family. Mom, dad, and I had a brother who was about 4 years old. So he provided much of my inspiration, having an older brother. And we were a happy family. Both mom and dad were working, and my brother and I were in school. And we grew up in a healthy surrounding with a neighborhood full of supportive friends, and it was a great neighborhood. Oh, I had role models, and probably they all were in the sports arena. Uh, Naturally, being playing all sports, every season, basketball, football, baseball season, my role models would change with the season sport. And keeping busy under that environment was a good growing up cycle period for me as well. Well, as I mentioned, sports played a big role in my life. One evening, we had all attended a basketball game at the local gymnasium. And after the basketball game, we went to the local hamburger joint, which most kids did in those days to fraternize after a sport game. And while sitting in the car, we had heard earlier in the day about this new song by a group called the Beatles. I said, the Beatles, that's a crazy name. And later I found out they were named after Buddy Holly and the Crickets. So the Beatles and the Crickets, I got that connection. We were sitting in the back seat of a friend's car, and the Beatles song came on, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. I Want to Hold Your Hand. We were all frozen. We were mesmerized by the song. And someone in the back seat, midway through the song, began talking, and then simultaneously, all four of us said, "Shut up!" And it hurt the guy's feelings so bad, he got up and got out of the car. But music was inspiring to my generation during that era. In my neighborhood, there was a neighborhood band called the Gentrys that I became the road manager. I was a year older than them and actually graduated from school. Uh, and they had a million selling record, went to number 3 on the Billboard charts as they were seniors in high school. So naturally, I coattailed them as a road manager, and it was the beginning of a new experience in my life. Yeah, while I was in school, I was the president of the senior chorus. Don't know how I got that distinction. It was a group of about 55 or 60 of us. I had no ambition to be a singer, but I think I was awarded the president of the chorus simply because of my people skills. And we sang during school auditorium meetings, Christmas plays, seasonal plays in the auditorium. And it was a great experience as I learned a lot about vocalizing music in those days. And as mentioned earlier, with the group in the neighborhood, being a rock and roll band that was playing all over town, and VFWs and YMCAs and high school gymnasiums, the Gentrys were popular, and naturally I gravitated to that lifestyle, and the music business seemed like a good business I might be interested in the long run. Yeah, the music business provided me with a great lift. After we traveled all over the country, we traveled the Gentrys in a rented station wagon. There was six of us in a station wagon pulling a 9x11 U-Haul trailer, and we traveled all over the country, and it was a great experience. When I left the Gentrys, got to notice the attention of the Stax Records president. Stax Records was a local rhythm and blues record company that was located in Memphis. And upon leaving the Gentrys, I got an interview with Jim Stewart, the president, and his right-hand man, the producer, Steve Cropper. And upon that interview, I was hired as the local promotion manager for Stax Records for the Mid-South. Jim Stewart, the president of Stax, who had hired me, played a very important role model in my life. And working for the company, it was unheard of in those days for rhythm and blues songs to be played on top 40 radio, which was in those days white radio, which would play rhythm and blues artists. But we succeeded, and the label became globally famous. And upon that notification, another record company, Atlantic Records, noticed what I was doing and offered me a job as a regional promotion director, covering 5 or 6 states for the record label. Well, the label Atlantic was experimenting with signing many of the British rock bands at the time. Many of them were singing rhythm and blues songs, but they were coming from the British Isles. And Atlantic was experiencing a tremendous amount of success. And upon that, I traveled with many of the bands during those days from city to city. We would call on radio stations, newspapers, and TVs. And my media background began during that era, as I would be taking these artists around, and we would be having after concert meet and greets where we would invite disc jockeys and fans and media people, newspaper reviewers, TV personnel to the meet and greets, and we'd all have a party after their initial gigs. And it was a great period of my life traveling city to city. Well, there's many trends taking place during that era. Uh, the music business is like any other business, like uh, beans or cereal or cornflakes. You had a shelf life. A group would be popular for 3 to 5 albums. A new group would come up and be popular for 8 or 10 albums, and so forth and so on. But music was changing in those days. When I started, it was 8 tracks and 45 RPM singles, and we went to cassettes and album sales, which dominated the market. And then as years passed, it later became popular with CDs. CDs became popular, then later downloading music online. But some of the record companies that I experienced this success with, as mentioned, is Stax Records and Atlantic Records. But I also worked for 20th Century Fox Records, which is a great period. I was responsible for working many states during the launching of the Star Wars film and soundtrack. From there, I joined EMI Records and moved to the Pacific Northwest, where I've been ever since here in Seattle. It has been a great ride. Had met many friends who are still friends with in the music business. And I look at those as the greatest years of my life, considering all the traveling I did. And I was single, fortunately, so it allowed me to move city to city, day to day, week to week. Oh, yes, I love the music business. I retired from the business in 1995. I became a full-time father as my son, who was in middle school at the time, moved to Seattle with me. and I made a pledge that my son um, would graduate with the same guys and girls that he went to school with in middle school. So I kept that pledge, and instead of bouncing from city to city or school to school, he stayed in the same school district and did graduate with those same kids. And that was an important period of my life because I was also maintaining a full-time parenthood. Being a photographer, this is an important story I've got to share with you. Turn back the clock to when I was in college, as I worked at night at a truck lines as a bill typist. I typed freight bills at night, went to school in the daytime, generally come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and worked at 11 or 11:30. Well, one day the phone rang while I was working one afternoon, and we were given the bad news that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had been killed in Memphis. And we had to close the trucking facilities because there was a curfew that was put on the entire city. So we had to close my office. I walked out to my car, supposedly supposed to go home because of the curfew. But for some unusual reason, I still don't understand, I drove to the airport. The airport was just probably 2.5 miles from the truck lines. And I walked through the corridor of the airport and saw all these newsmen that were piling in from airplanes coming in from all over the country to cover the news of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I was inspired by all this train of traffic people coming in. And I noticed these two hip-looking guys, kind of had nice long hair, dressed like I did. And I kind of followed them to the car rental counter and found out at the car rental counter they were on assignments. One was on assignment from Life magazine. His name's Steve Shapiro, and the other guy with him was on assignment with the Los Angeles Times. His name was Pete Johnson. Well, we were talking to the car rental counter and come to find out they weren't familiar with the streets of Memphis, had never been there before, and I recommended, hey, how would you like for me to be your valet driver? I'll taxi you around in the car because I know the streets. And they looked at one another and agreed, yeah, that was a great idea. So for the next 3 days, I taxied them around. There was curfews. We were stopped everywhere we went. And lo and behold, these two journalists both had White House credentials. And that blew me away because that allowed us to travel anywhere during the curfew. And we were traveling beside tanks on the streets and just craziness everywhere. And after the 3 days of covering the Martin Luther King passing, the murder, we met back at the car rental counter and we tallied up, and they gave me $300 for my 3 days of being their driver, their valet driver. And I was so inspired by being with them for 3 days and everything that we experienced, once in a lifetime experience, that with that $300, I went straight to the camera store and I bought me a camera. And that was my beginning and my love for photography starting at that very point. It was a magic period of my life. Yeah, honing my skills during those days, I didn't do portraits with photography. I didn't do landscape. I was always inspired more so by photojournalism. Some of my favorite photographers I got from reading Look magazine, Life magazine. When I was a kid, my mom being a librarian, there was a constant flow of magazines and newspapers coming in our mailbox daily. And naturally, being a curious kid, I was constantly flipping through the magazines and reading the photojournalism and the journalism, and inspired to be in that area. But one thing in particular, my first and only claim to fame from those days, I went to the Atlanta Pop Festival in 1969, and fortunately I got stage passes. There was 350, 400,000 people attending the Pop Festival with probably 25 or 30 world recognized groups. And I took pictures at the Atlanta Pop Festival and they came out great. And I came back home and I sent some of the pictures to Rolling Stone magazine with a cover letter saying these are pictures I took at the Atlanta Pop Festival. Well, I didn't hear back from the magazine for 6 months. And then one day I subscribed to the magazine. I picked up the magazine, and lo and behold, there was one of the photographs I had taken at the Atlanta Pop Festival featured in Rolling Stone magazine. So it was from that point in time, my claim to fame, that in 1969 I had a picture published in Rolling Stone magazine, and to this day, that's one of my most outstanding photographs to ever have published. Midori and I met, we were actually neighbors in a condominium community, and we met one summer. We were both sitting around a pool and struck up a conversation, and it went really well. Well, come to find out, I didn't see Midori for another year. And I saw her next summer at the pool, and we began talking. And at that point in time, we started dating. And I don't mind saying she's been a major inspiration in my life and a support system that has helped me take the steps that I have in becoming a book author and a photographer. She's been a major inspiration, and I'm just delighted that we met. Oh, Midori and I's favorite activities are traveling around. We love going to see our grandkids down in California. And we've actually, we're on our third motorhome. We travel back and forth, and it's such a great time to be able to travel up and down the highway, Oregon, California, coastal, and Washington. And we always documented our travels with photographs and videos, and posted them on YouTube, and got a lot of attention from those travels. And that was probably traveling with our dogs and cat. That was some of the best times of our lives. I got involved with Naturally Plus in February of 2014. Naturally, Midori was first. I came a few months after she did. But it goes back to when I was growing up. My dad and mom got me on vitamins at a young age. I was on Super Plenamins, which you could buy at any drugstore at the time. Well, later that translated into when I began to buy my own vitamins, and for probably 15 years, I took Shaklee vitamins. And I think every morning for perhaps 15 years, I had a Shaklee milkshake for breakfast. And then when I got out of the record business, I was invited to several Amway meetings. Now, I went to probably 4 or 5 Amway meetings and investigated it, but I just didn't like the idea of filling my garage full of product and trying to sell product out of my garage and then trying to hit quotas every month. That was just all too demanding for me. So in February of 2014, when Midori introduced me to Naturally Plus, I became her support system and began taking all the products, and it naturally led me to continue to grow within that system. And today, some of my favorite products are Myrtol, Super Lutein, Izumio, and Lift It. All 4 of my favorite products. People don't know that a lot of men nowadays like to use facial products to keep the crow's feet and the wrinkles from their face. And probably the latter, Lifting, is one of my most recent favorites. But I have a good story to tell you regarding Naturally Plus. It's been about a year and a half ago, 2-3 years ago. Midori and I were down in Tacoma talking to another couple who had just come on board about a year and a half earlier. We were having lunch with a couple, and I began talking to the man across the table, and he said, you know, I've been taking Super Lutein and Izumio for about a year and a half now, and I don't feel anything. I mean, what's the big deal? I don't feel anything happening. So I asked him a question. I said, you still work? And he said, yes. I said, he worked in a larger environment in his workplace where there's many people constantly moving around. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do people at your workplace, do they ever get sick, or do they ever have to take sick leave? And he says, oh my God, yes. They're always complaining and getting sick all around me. I said, well, what about you? Do you get sick? He said, oh, I never get sick. He said, I hadn't been sick in a year and a half, 2 years. I hadn't been sick in a long time. I said, well, see, there's your testimonial right there. You're taking super lutein and you're taking Zimeo, but yet you haven't had any sickness or illness during that cycle. So that is a testimony in itself, as it helps build your immune system. And where everyone else is getting sick, you say you haven't been sick in a year and a half or 2 years. So that testimony remains heavy, and I'll always remember that. Being a spirit achiever with Naturally Plus has been very inspirational, as it's allowed me, Dory and I, to travel around the world and meeting many quality people and meeting many of our Naturally Plus family. And it's been a great time is maintain our health. And we've also had extra income that's come in that's also been important. So I can't say enough about Naturally Plus and the opportunity to speak on its behalf. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard, because I love Naturally Plus.